Welcome, everybody, to the Resilient Minds podcast. I'm very, very grateful, excited to welcome Jesh Durox to the show. Welcome, brother, to the show. It's amazing to connect. I'm extremely grateful for your time and energy, bro.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So, for those that don't know, Jesh, uh, an anthropologist, entrepreneur, exploring social environments on how human connection, wellness, and creative genius come together. So I'm excited to go deeper into that, bro, because we kind of get to step into that together here live, get to know each other. But tell us a little bit more about that. And if you can expand a little bit deeper on that perspective, it would be really amazing.
So I grew up in an unusual, unorthodox way. I was quite isolated compared to how most kids grow up. And as a result of that, I became absolutely obsessed with human connection. I am strongly empathic and, like most humans, crave to be close to people. And because I didn't have that in the perhaps more typical way, I started observing the function of it and the mechanics of how it worked, I think in a much more analytical, thoughtful way, rather than it just being something that you take for granted because you absorbed it. That's usually how human connection is taught, is through osmosis. And because of that, I ended up developing a very mechanistic understanding of how friendships form and how relationships begin and also how they end. And there really isn't a lot of great language for it because it's not something that we think about. It's more of it's a felt sense when you're a friend with somebody. It's not like an internal designation consciously. And the reasons for that is the system that allows that bonding to happen are literally millions of years older than conscious thought. And of course, language as we understand it is generally an expression of conscious thought. So we're dealing with two very different systems that evolved at very, very different times. And the distance between those two systems, the different abilities that they have, really affect a lot. I mean, you could say in a certain way, many of the problems of the world have to do with the distance between the feeling system and the thought system and our confusion between the two. Because you would think that since we think all the time, we should just be able to think our way through a relationship problem. And anyone who has ever been in a relationship is pretty clear that that, generally speaking, does not work. And I'm not saying thought has no place there, but what I'm just emphasizing is that the bones, so to speak, of how relationships form and why have far more to do with this ancient feeling system, this intangible, this difficult to talk about, than they really have to do with anything that is in our, so-called rational language with each other. So I ended up learning a lot about that space and then putting language to it to some degree. And because I understood it more mechanistically, I was able to experiment a lot more with it and kind of get measurable results based on that. So this is all a quite heady way of saying I studied how humans connect for a really long time. And I studied how our connections affect each other. And if I have to pick one word for the result of our connecting with each other and its effect, profound. We are profoundly affected by every single person that we have ever connected with. And we are also profoundly affected by people who were close to us in proximity, in power, that we did not connect with. The degree of connection or the lack thereof is the most shaping thing that happens to a human. So much so that humans are better described as participants in dynamics than I think almost by any other way. We are relational creatures. We are the sum of our relationships. So I summarize everything I've learned in the last certain ways, 40 years of studying humans and more directly 20 years by saying the most important thing I learned about humans is that we are a response to our environment. And the primary piece of that is the kinds of connections we have or don't have with other people. And paying attention to that space, it's it's integral. I mean, you can learn how to make yourself. You can literally learn how to make yourself if you understand how and why the connections in your life affect you. And I work for, I dream for, I build for a day where human existence, human character, human consciousness is cultivated on purpose, thoughtfully, articulately, beautifully, rather than just a random throw of a dice and Jack is a dickhead and John is kind of nice and Mary is, she's okay, but she has trauma. I mean, this is kind of the way that it happens is we all get our dice thrown and we end up the way that we are. It doesn't have to be like that. And we're moving into a new time where such things can be chosen.
Beautiful. Very well said. Thank you for your clarity. It's very important, and the work that you've done on yourself is very evident and clear. And so I can see, uh, as you mentioned, osmosis or the mirror neurons. It's a nice reflection. I love it. So appreciate you, brother. It means a lot. One question I had, because like you, I think that the curiosity that I've had about people and environments, and really tapping into these different cultures and wisdom teachers, I realized, that the more I went into these different environments, and the more I got curious about, okay, this environment, I need to go into this to find the certainty, not of the environment, but the one in myself. And
Ooh.
so, how do you find is that your response to the environment actually becomes you are the environment, and so you get to actually start to shine from that place. And I know I'm jumping kind of to the end, but because it's right into my brain right now and the curiosity is right there right now, I really need to ask it right off the hop. I apologize if I'm jumping, but
No, no, no.
yeah.
This whole this whole kind of warren of conversation and thought, it does remind me of the way that some animals, live underground, and so they'll have openings here and here and here, and you can really enter it from any place, and you can go all through it, and you can come out again. I mean, it's really at the center. It's kind of the unsayable center of human experience is this exact topic. And what you just mentioned about being affected by the environment or being the environment that affects is to me the core of what makes humans so profound because at least in potential, all humans, sorry, all animals are responses to their environment. If a bear is sleeping and you poke it, it's going to respond to that poked environment. If a koala sees some kind of fruit that it wants to eat and recognizes as a delicious thing, it will reach out its paw. So all animals respond to the environment. All life responds to environment. It's really key to everything. Something that's so strange about humans is we not only respond to our environment like all other animals, we have a greater capacity to shape and form and design the environment, not by a little bit, by magnitudes of order that are so far removed from the other animals, it's not even close, So you'll hear people sometimes say things like whales have huge brains and maybe that means they're smarter than us. It's difficult to measure such things with any kind of, empirical measuring stick because we're the ones inventing the stick. But even if they are more intelligent than us, um, they're not shaping the environment in the way that we are. I mean, if you think about rockets, it's really, really interesting because invention, and I mean this kind of takes us a little bit into the creativity piece, is creativity is not really making something from nothing, which is a very, very common misconception. And it's a big reason why many people don't consider themselves creatives, is because they don't know how to make something from nothing, so they're clearly not creative. That's a complete misunderstanding of the actual creative process. Mozart didn't create a piano, he didn't create notes. All he did was rearrange them into an
Mhm.
order that he liked, that made him move, that touched him, that made something in him wake. So what he really had that most people don't have is maybe three things. First, he was very curious about spending time in that way of pressing into something that somebody else had already made. He was very curious, and all children are curious. He remained curious much longer than most people, and that is
Mhm.
absolutely key in creative process. Second is he was very sensitive to his own body because he would be curious and he would press different keys, and all of a sudden one key press would make him go, oh, whoa, that wait, I have to do that again. Being sensitive to the body, so key in the creative process. As a side tangent, I hope I don't lose my major point here, but I just have to throw in there's a huge lack of mental health on the planet. There's a lot of people feeling very low. You know, that's something probably everybody is quite familiar with. Nobody has really posited that many great solutions to that, at least, you know, that hit popular culture. And something I've always found so striking is that when you have an epiphany, which is one of the most special things that happens to a human, when you have an epiphany, when you realize something, when you solve something, when you hit the piano note that sounded really unexpectedly good after the last one, you never feel sad in that moment. In the moment of an epiphany, you go, it's joyful. Epiphanies are joyful. So if there's not enough joy in society, if there's not enough joy on the planet right now, it's directly connected to too little epiphany is happening. So epiphany is one of the main things that humans do that gives us this sense of elation, that gives us this sense of, you know, confidence, all of those things. I believe our ancestors were much more regularly experiencing epiphany because they were in spaces that constantly required creative process, you know? So that's a small aside there that hopefully we could dig into a little bit deeper later. But so Mozart had the curiosity, he had the sensitivity to his body, which, by the way, all children have, nearly all children have the sensitivity to their body. If you try to feed them a spaghetti and they are excited about the spaghetti, they will be very excited about that. If you try to feed them broccoli and they do not want broccoli, they will make it very clear to you that they do not want that broccoli. They're very sensitive to what their body wants and what it doesn't want, and they take action upon that sensitivity in very clear forms. Picasso went as far as to say, all children are artists. The problem is how to remain one. And for several reasons, that curiosity dies off and the sensitivity to the body also die off. So the third thing I would say about Mozart to, you know, make a very complex subject simple is he had persistence and he had determination. He had perseverance that were far above normal average human levels because why does this child who's excited about everything, you know, you show them wrapping paper and they're like, you know, they have an epiphany looking at wrapping paper, which is a pretty amazing skill if you think about it. And it's kind of sucky that the older that we get, the less excited that we get about wrapping paper. The contents of a purse, you know, are completely awe-inspiring to us when we're at a certain age. And then we get older and we're just like, yeah, it's just a purse. When you really look inside of that purse and everything that's in there, there's a phone, you know, that's like perhaps the peak pinnacle of all human technology, literally built by more than 10, 20, 30 million combined minds. It's not something to just be like, "No, it's a poem," you know? It's like, no, this is pinnacle of fucking society right here inside of this. There's, makeup stuff. There's like a key to a car. I mean, if you really look at the contents of a purse, it is awe-inspiring. It's completely awe-inspiring. And so what really happens is we actually lose this ability to see. We lose the ability to see the contents of a purse. We lose the ability to see what a phone actually is. And sure, a baby may not understand all of those, you know, long trains that allow such things to be formed, but they most certainly understand on some visceral level, this is astonishing. And most humans do lose their capacity to be astonished. Mozart never did. And there are forces in the world that press that out of us, that scare that out of us, that push us and shape us into this other thing that is in many ways deadened, that is in many ways numbed, that no longer has access to the sensitivity of our body, our birthright towards recognizing and moving towards epiphany and choices that lead us to epiphany. It shuts down our curiosity. There are forces there. So I'm not blaming this on people and saying they are the way they are because, they're not good enough. And it's an unfortunate piece of the whole raising up of the Mozarts is that it often kind of like diminishes the rest of us. And some of us are him and most of us aren't. It's just the way that it is. It's the roll of the dice. No, like absolutely not. No, there is an environment around us that shapes us in that way. And for some reason, people like Mozart were not affected by that environment in the same kind of a way. They pierced the environment. They became unbowed to it. Whereas most of us, we conform. We change from this wild, brave, royal, constantly curious, voraciously seeking joy, voraciously seeking epiphany. Not some of us, all babies are like that. Like all babies are like that. And so if you watch that start point and you see the end point for most people, it's clear that certain things are lost. And for whatever reason, that never really happened to him, not in the same way. So I've spent a lot of time studying people like that and why. How did they perceive the environment differently than we did? What were they responding to? What did they see different that most people don't see? And what you always end up finding from these so-called great ones that pierce the barriers that way is the way that they live their life ends up creating environments that other people respond to by finding the astonishment, by finding the beauty. And if you've ever been lucky enough to be in an orchestra hall where there's a symphony playing a piece of Mozart, an environment will be there that you will be strongly invited into feeling, experiencing epiphany. And that interconnection between all of us, I'm obsessed with it. I can't stop thinking about it. I can't stop thinking about the fact that Mozart pierced through the veil, found something so beautiful that he went into epiphany, that he went to an astonishment, and then he devoted himself to recreating that, to capturing it in some kind of a form. Now the guy's been dead for a minute. And still, those decisions that he made are constant portals, constant doorways into this same piece that somehow exists in me, even though I never knew him, even though we spoke different languages, even though there's so many things you could say that are different about us. This sensitivity of beauty and the way that it opens us, it's universal to all of us. And so much of my work is about how do we move into the part of us that creates the environment, specifically the kind of environment that draws us into beauty, into epiphany. And what is it in us that, generally speaking, will not, will play small, will become deadened, will conform. I'm very, very fascinated with the difference between those two choices. And clearly, the second choice is much more common. It's much more popular. There are reasons for that. And I will never, ever, ever believe that the reasons for that is that some people have it and some people don't.
We're all artists, 100%. And the fact that you bring this up is a profound responsibility that I find when we discover this within ourselves, and then being able to encourage our brothers and sisters from all different ethnicities, cultures, tribes, belief systems, levels of awareness, encourage that level of curiosity is like it's almost like the what do they call it? It's like the Vatican used to call it, or maybe back in the day, is like it's this eternal cup of just the fountain of youth, really, right? And it gives us the most expressive ability to tap into this feeling. Just before this, I was on a call where I lead a youth leadership call, and all these youth, we were talking about the feelings, about encouraging ourselves to tap into that level of emotional intelligence and back into the moment of listening to the meditation as we're speaking. And what does that feel like versus what do we think? And it's fascinating, because in the past I would ask people, "Hey, how are you feeling?" They're like, "What do you mean?" And they would get off put by that, you know. And so it's interesting, because I believe that a lot of our youth, we must listen more to them, because they are of this higher state or higher level of intelligence, because they are trusting more in their feelings versus the our ancestors that, or our predecessors, let's say, had created societies based off of the mind. And so I think that this is where now, like you said, we're encouraging more of our youth to step into this childish or innocent or a youthful perspective, because we really just become older in terms of age, but our essence, our youthfulness, our curiosity can still stay. And the park just becomes so much more bigger rather than going to a small park. The park is just the planet, you know? And so I'm curious, because you really touched on these importance of the breakthrough and the epiphany. And I want to go back to that, as you mentioned, and listening to the feeling, listening to the communication of the feeling. I always was fascinated. I think that there's a level, not I know, not I think I know, the feeling of our heart's intelligence and the ability to listen to our heartbeat at our fingertips, and to really get curious about what's being said when we start being sensitive to that level of emotion. As you mentioned, what Mozart was able to play with the piano, and then how did that feel? What was that level of resonance that able to then communicate with our nature's body, because of the water that's within our bodies and that element to be able to communicate? So is it possible, when we look back at our, my sister, for example, was all her life told that there was something wrong with her mentally, that she has bipolar, that she has something wrong with her, and medicated. And it was one of my reasons for one of my very big reasons for going on this big journey around, finding and understanding and getting curious, because I know her core, I know her essence, I know her. She raised me in times of like uncertainty, and was there for my parents and has been there. And so when society like tried to manipulate her perspective, and I can look at her today and I could see the genius in her, the creativity, the magic, and this lack of curiosity of our societal construct, and how it created so many limitations for our nature to come through, is something that I believe today, you and I and many others that are on this journey alongside us, we have a responsibility to build something better. And
Yes, agreed.
so because we get to step into this new level of ancestry, so going back to that listening and that feeling, why do you feel, or why do you think, why do you feel, not why do you think, why do you feel that our predecessors chose to not trust in that? Or is there something that you have discovered through your research, in terms of going through these breakthroughs, these epiphanies, and not willing to pierce that veil?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much there. I think one of the core shaping elements of, I think, our whole history of humans is that for so long, for millions of years, our ancestors, those who came before us, were tribal.
Mhm.
And we evolved in a period that's so long, it's impossible to comprehend. I mean, we say something like 1,000 years. Look at what's happened in the last 1,000 years. I mean, what will happen 1,000 years from now? It's so hard for us to even imagine that. Look at what's happened in the last 100 years. There were barely anything remotely recognizable as computers 100 years ago. So look at, what's changed in that particular category. So millions of years is incomprehensible to us. And for millions of years, we were being shaped and formed in tribal units. Our brains developed that way. Our sense of mental health developed that way. Our creative function developed that way. Our feeling process developed that way. So it's kind of weird to think about now because most of us don't hang out with 30 to 50 other people every single day and night, 24 hours a day. But that's how we evolved for a really, really, really long time. And the difference between that model of living and this model of living is profound in so many ways. You couldn't even measure all of it. And to speak of any of it will always be to reduce it, to some degree, but you can kind of simplify it in certain ways. One of them is that the feeling system itself um, is communal. And it's part of the reason feelings are so difficult for us is because we are meant to be regulated by each other. So there are these very popular things now where people say, codependent and all of these kind of things. And there's certainly something to look at there. I'm not discounting all of that stuff entirely, but it's become a buzzword where anybody who's not feeling well or is, you know, attaches too strong or is too sad, it's like, oh, it's a codependent relationship. It's a codependent relationship. It's a complex subject, but it cannot be separated from the fact that all of us were built to be regulated by everybody else. And we had 30 to 50 people that would do it. And a big part of the problem in relationships these days is that a 30 to 50 person tribe has shrunk. You're lucky if you have 5 people around you who you feel totally, completely safe with. Most people don't have, would be lucky to have one. But there's a really interesting that happens there in the shrinking of the tribe. If my tribe used to be 30 to 50, and that's what my brain designates as, tribe, and they have permission to basically have access to my emotions, to raise them or to lower them. And that's shrunk down to all the way to one. If that one person is happy with me, it's as if to my brain, 50 people are cheering me and exalting me in that particular moment. And if that one person is pissed at me, if that one person says something cruel to me, if that one person diminishes me, it is the same chemical effect in my brain as if 50 people I had known my whole life all stand in a line and I'm on the other side and they say, "You are wrong. You are bad." And that, my friend, is a death sentence. And that is how the body remembers it in the old memory. And that is how it feels even now. It's pre-death being shamed in that particular way, being diminished in that particular way. And it just cannot be overstated, the importance of that. It just can't, because it plays into every other part of society. When your body thinks you're about to die, centers in the body such as connection, rational thought, creative problem solving, you don't have access to any of those, generally speaking. You go straight into fight, flight, freeze. And huge percentages of daily human interactions can fairly be described as falling into one of those three categories. And so, largely, this society that we've created and um, many of the effects of it, and even the things that we've designed, have been designed for people who are either terrified,
Mhm.
who are trying to run away because they are, they just can't handle this. They can't handle this system. They can't handle how people are treating them. They can't handle how they treat themselves. So they numb. When you look at how much of commerce actually has to do with distraction and numbing and coping, it's a gargantuan percentage of commercial endeavor has to do with basically what we could call flight. You know, unfortunately, not the cool kind where the birds swoop around and you get excited about it, or you get to go to Japan or something. The kind of flight that's like you're running away, except in this case, you're running away from yourself. You're running away from your power. You're running away from your sense of well-being. And then there's those people too. Um, that could also be called freeze in a certain way. There's those people too who are just, they're fucking angry about it. They've been hurt too much and they want to lash out at the system. And you see that in the heartbreaking, shootings that happen. You see it in the way people treat each other. You see it in the way that abuse passes down generation to generation. It's fight, flight, freeze. It's a huge percentage of how humans perceive what the world is actually just the direct result of the majority of the planet, a majority of the time, making decisions from this place that is the rational place to be in response to an environment that is completely unsafe. And so, a part of this difference of how some people live grandly and how many other people just don't has to do with a person finding a sense of safety in themselves and a sense of safety in the community around them. And when you have that sense of safety, okay, now you have a chance of accessing higher brain function. And it's so striking to me that many of the people that we consider great, based on the things we know about them looking back, an inordinate percentage of them were on the spectrum. And one of the most fascinating, principles of being on that spectrum is you will tend to put less weight to the social signals from other people because they just don't read as highly to you. And because of that, it doesn't always work out this way, but you have a better chance of not being crushed by them, not being shaped by them in that same way. You just get to be in your own lane longer in a certain way. That's not the only factor there, but it's a significant one. It's a really, really significant one. And it's also striking to me that many of the people who are my heroes either believed they talked directly to God or to spirits or to ancestors or to aliens. Nikola Tesla, who's probably my favorite person, he's at least in my top five. He literally believed he spoke to aliens on a regular basis. And if you just think about that for a minute, whether or not any of those things are true, if I'm having a conversation with God or with aliens or with my ancestors or with beautiful forest spirits or whatever it is you want to call it, and it's a good conversation, what I've actually done is I have recreated safety in a tribe. And especially when it comes to an idea like God, the whole idea of God is that God is the ultimate safety. He always loves you no matter what, always going to take care of you. What's actually happening neurochemically? Safety. So whether or not God is real or not, to me, is almost like a whole separate issue. God is a really fucking good idea. It's really good because it means that in any moment, if you really believe that you're talking to God, the one that always is all powerful and is watching over you at all moments, You have neurological safety like a fucking samurai, ninja, invincible person. And that's just good. It's just good internally for you. So there's this whole argument these days about, oh yeah, all that stuff was bullshit. It was, it's all this. And we've literally thrown out like hundreds of thousands of years of stunning social technology that we created to solve very complex problems, such as how do you feel safe in a world that's constantly trying to kill you? Nature is talked about in this kind of sweet way a lot of the time where it's like, no, nature. And it's like, nature tries to kill us constantly, also, I mean, nature is cute from a $1 million log cabin when you're looking out from a window and you have heat and you have a fridge and you have bear spray nearby in case. If you're just like actually in nature, you'll get a clearer sense of what nature actually is. And the fact is that our ancestors ran from nature. Like, so all that to say, this is a scary world for a lot of reasons. It's a dangerous world for a lot of reasons. And most of us just don't have the safety that we need, internally to even be able to start to access those particular places. So first thing, baseline, before anything else is there has to be creation of safety. There has to. And it needs to be understood that that's what it actually is. And the beautiful thing about safety is when you become a safe space internally, through many different ways it's possible to do that, you invite safety in other people. I used to be a ricochet of all of the unsafety in this world. I clearly remember that. I am no longer like that. I am a profoundly safe space. And in my presence, someone else has a much higher chance of finding their own safety. And two of us together, having committed to safety, become even easier for that to happen. So again, it's like there's so many ways to talk about these very, very important issues, but we affect each other so much. And a big part of that is this move from the 30 to 50 person tribe to that being totally dismantled. And now many of us are individuals or a part of very small packs who interface. Even if we are lucky to have 5 people who love us, we probably don't spend all day with those 5 people. We probably leave them and go spend time with 10, 20, 30 other people that we don't know at all, that we don't trust at all, we don't sleep in the same bed with at night, that we don't make meals for each other. There's so many things that used to just be a regular part of how our bodies knew that we were safe and okay, et cetera, that we are just so far from. It's almost like weird to imagine at this particular point. And my point in all of this is not having that changes the part of the brain that becomes dominant. And most of us are living, moving, making choices from a part of the brain that is as old as a lizard is. And therefore, while that piece is dominant, we will never be able to do anything that a lizard can't do. Lizards don't make symphonies. They don't fall in love. They don't create safety for all of the other lizards around them. That's just not what they do. And so then you have tons of people who are like, oh, I'm just not like that. I'm just not the kind of person, who creates symphonies. No, you just don't know how to create safety for yourself because it wasn't taught to you, because it was robbed from us. And then those few who do have a chance at going far enough to find the beautiful things, to devoting their life to building them and to showing the rest of us.
Wow. Just I could listen and listen and listen, and it's important that we're all paying attention to what you're sharing here, because there's such a layer that I'm hearing even underneath of the way that we've been really many of us manipulated in a lot of ways, in the way that we have been brought up to thinking like a lizard, and thinking of just ourselves instead of and terrified and running away or being angry, and then behaving in that matter to what is then we passing that on, and we're just projecting that consistently to other people, shaming or
Yes.
disallowing our true nature, or not allowing our true nature to really come through. And this environment of what I hear is like a death sentence. It's not actually, it's like we just need to, like, don't tell them how to live, show them, type of thing, you know, is like a great saying. And and this feeling of death, ultimately so many people have learned that it's such a terrible thing, such a terrifying expression of what our eternal expression. And I love how you connected it back to spirit and our creator God. You know, I really find that for me, throughout my journey, there's been times when it's like, you're too intense, Eric, you're too intense, too much of this or too much of that, and like, just go over here. And so I would get curious and I would take that in by myself, and I would say, what am I doing wrong here? And I would talk to our creator, our teacher, and I would say, what can I do better? And I wouldn't blame the person that pushed me away. I would take the responsibility and I would figure out what is it in me that I need to navigate? What is it in me that I need to uh, encourage myself, or how can I create more certainty? And because it was such a pattern, that I realized, because of this energy that I have and this ability, or this like desire to just want to serve, you know, it felt for many people like I was over bearing myself, right? And I needed to learn how to navigate and listen more. And I know that that was something that was a really uh, important part of my journey, because the listening is really everything, at least for me. But then once I started to listen, and like you said, I went into nature, spent time in the jungle, and learned to listen to the internal self, and recognizing that that internal self is the actually expression of the jungle, and I could feel the wind and the rain and the butterfly and the bird. I think that from that place, again, that feeling became, wow, I'm here. That's what I needed to do, is start to be able to listen. And so this was something that I find fascinating, especially from the tribal perspective, and then turning that into, hold on a second, is death and life really a difference, or is there a need to be scared of any of that? And then realizing that our abilities to see can then become here in the now, and we can make that happen. How can people start to navigate this process, from your perspective? What can they do to stop being, maybe not even stop, but just start living, rather than fearing death, or being terrified, or projecting this experience of runaway, or not taking responsibility of the situations?
There's a really interesting saying that Jesus had that I've always really loved. He said, "The letter of the law um, is dead, um, and the spirit of the law is alive." And it's a really fascinating kind of thing to have said. What is the letter, and what is the spirit? And another way you could talk about that is the form of something, and the essence of it. So I know that's a little bit abstract, but I'm going to bring it back into something very practical, which is one simple way that I use that has been very helpful to myself and many other people to practically start making changes in the life experience of not feeling like you're constantly having to be in fight, flight, freeze from the rest of the world, is in paying attention to which part of your mind is dominant. And the mind is very complex. far beyond even what the brightest people on earth presently understand, way beyond my own understanding. But there are three places that I found a lot of value in paying attention to. One is called the animal mind, one is called the intuitive mind, and one is called the knowledge mind. So in any given moment, in my simplified kind of metaphor here, you're dominant in one of those three spaces. And to explain them briefly, to give a little bit of language to help learn how to navigate which of these three that you're in, we could say each of the three will produce very, very different outcomes because the animal mind is constantly obsessed with survival, and this has to do with the question that you mentioned of the life or the death. Am I going to survive to the next moment? And all of these systems are beautiful. It's not that one is bad and the others are good. If we weren't afraid of death, we never would have gotten as far as we have as a species. The fear itself is not a bad thing. Living under fear constantly, having it dominate your choices, that's where it really becomes problematic. But the animal mind is based on survival. That's what it's for. The intuitive mind is our system for dealing with the unknown. And it's where creativity happens. It's where connection happens. It's where relationships are really actually formed and built because we don't truly know another. So intuitive mind is the system for dealing with the unknown. A knowledge mind is very powerful, and it's our system for dealing with the known, with the familiar world. And what you see in knowledge mind is pattern recognition. You see judgment between two different things. Is it this or is it that? Is this one better or is that one worse? You see skill is a part of the knowledge mind. Skill is a bunch of patterns that we have memorized that allow us to achieve very specific things. Expectation is in that part. So what basically happens, very, very simply said, is in the beginning of human life, you don't know anything. So your knowledge mind is completely dormant. And you have the animal mind, which is very strong. It makes you want to survive. It's got your instincts and, make sure you get food. And if you're upset, you scream and all those kinds of things. And then you have this intuitive mind, and the intuitive mind allows you to interface with the unknown. And when you're a baby, everything is unknown. So you are necessarily in the intuitive mind constantly. And what you see as a direct benefit of being in the intuitive mind is awe is easier to find. Connection is easier to happen. It's far easier to connect with a baby or a young child than it is most adults, especially authentically connecting. We learn how to do this thing that we call connecting, and we're like, hi, my name's Jesh. How are you doing? Did you see the game last night? That's not actually connecting. That's knowing how to be polite, which comes from the knowledge mind, not the intuitive mind. And as I was saying before, connection, friendship, it's a felt thing. It's not a known thing. And it has to do with this confusion between those two spaces, like I said before. So as we grow up and we start knowing more and more things, and we start being inducted into a society where it's very important to know this thing, because if you don't know this thing, you're not allowed to participate. And how well you know this thing, you'll get judged for, you'll get measured and compared against other people. People become deeper and deeper and deeper absorbed into their knowledge mind. So babies flicker back and forth between intuitive mind and animal mind, intuitive mind and animal mind. Most adults do the opposite. They flicker back and forth between knowledge mind and animal mind, knowledge mind and animal mind. And the most healthy form of human interaction is to be able to freely move between all three, to whichever one is the most beneficial in that particular moment. But most adults lose their access to intuitive mind. And as a result of that, you look at a purse and you look at the contents in there as a small baby, and you don't know what any of that is, and you're fucking fascinated. And you're like, what is this magical bag of endless universalness? And then as an adult, you look at it and you're like, it's a phone, it's a piece of lipstick, it's $20. And you see the difference that the body has to each of those things, to the mystery, to the unknown, to the infinite. awe happens, curiosity happens, exploration happens. And those are all things that lead to growing. They're all the things that lead to passionate expression. They're things that lead to beauty. Looking into a purse as an adult and knowing what all those things are, you very likely will not find exploration. You will not find awe. You will not find beauty. You will not find connection. So it's not that the knowledge mind is bad. It's just that's not what it's for. And it's very similar to like a knife. There are some things that a knife is just amazing for. If you have a carrot and you're trying to make a salad, use a knife. You know, if there is a bear running at you, that is not the time, to look at it and be like, what beautiful infinite part of the universe is manifesting in front of me in this. No, use a fucking knife. Like in that moment, there's moments where the knife matters. Judgment is a knife. Comparison is a knife. It's for separating this from that. But when it comes to love, when it comes to connection, when it comes to creating, don't bring a knife. Like that's not the vibe. So starting to pay attention to which of these three minds you're in is really, really helpful because if you're in knowledge mind and you're trying to create or you're trying to connect or you're trying to be awe-inspired, it's just not in the cards for you because that's literally not the function of that particular thing. And when you really look at um, how most commercial systems have been built, social media specifically, let's say, this one is of a particular interest to me. What is social media mostly? It's entirely built on comparison. It's entirely built on comparison. It's kind of become, look at these people who are in Mykonos having a fun time while I am not. Why are they prettier than me? Why do they have more invisible hearts than I do? Why do they have a Bugatti and I do not yet have a Bugatti? It's almost totally comparison. Why has it been built so strongly on that? Because if I perceive somebody to be far above me in some way, and yet I also perceive them to be peer to me in some way, it is intensely engaging because it means they're doing way better than I am. I'm not doing that good. I might die. And very many people are not thinking that consciously, but the body is feeling that. If there was one tribes person who was a peer to you, and they had all the clubs, and they had all the cheetah skins, and they had all of that, and you had nothing, you would be intensely interested in that. And why? And you would also be terrified that you were not contributing to the tribe at the same level as everyone else, and you were about to die. So all of social media has been basically made to hijack the limbic system through judgment, through comparison. And it's so heartbreaking to me because they've made this thing that is irresistible for people to look at that is has so little value, has so little benefit, has so little of helping people to the one thing that is really going to allow them to be contributive to other people. If you parrot the same thing that a million other people have parroted, the amount of value in that speech is very, very little. However, if you say the new thing that none of us have heard before, and it strikes, it hits, it opens something, you have a good chance of being contributive. And contribution is directly linked to self-worth, is directly linked to the health um, that you have in circles of, interconnection. And we go back to this, old tribal situation. And you're like, if you're a part of 30 people, and that's all there is in the world as far as you're concerned, your actions matter every single day to all 30 of those people. And if you're not contributing in a high way, it's curtains for you because food is too scarce. It's too hard to live. So if you're just sitting on your ass while the rest of us are working, our butt off to find the next coconut or whatever, if we move on, we're leaving your ass there. So what people are basically seeing now is they're surrounded by high coconut contributors constantly who are just bringing in millions and they're not. And they're being terrified and super obsessed to engage with that situation. What they're not doing is being encouraged to explore, being encouraged to learn, being encouraged to spend more time in the intuitive mind. So the most simple practical thing that I could say is Be in the intuitive mind as long as you possibly can, as often as you possibly can. Find spaces in your life where you don't know where you are and what you're doing or why. You already referenced that that for you was one of the major shifts in your life as you moved from wherever you were in the known system, perhaps in a job that you knew how to do and other people knew what they wanted from you, and you both knew if you did it right or not. You just left all of that, at least for a moment, and you went to the jungle where there were no rules, where it was all wild again, and you sensed the butterfly and you sensed the wind and the rain. What's happening there from my perspective is from a knowledge dominant place, knowledge mind dominant, you put yourself in an environment where you are now dominant in the intuitive mind. And what's so beautiful to me about all this is you'll feel the difference. You'll feel it. And when you are in right relationship and balance between those three minds, a feeling arises in the body that I call joy. It's not always happiness. It doesn't happen to be even pleasurable all of the time, but it is a sense of aliveness. And this beautiful sentence we say, I feel so alive right now, is very strange to me because it clearly says a couple things. One, it's a rare thing to say, which means most people don't feel alive very often. And two, it means aliveness is a felt sense. And we do have capacity to feel it. And to me, that's what joy is. Joy is a level of aliveness. It's a level of aliveness where you feel your aliveness so much that you remember, oh, I'm alive right now. Oh, I'm a being. Oh, I have free will agency. Oh, I can move to the jungle. I can blow up everything in my life and build it all over again. Oh, I can start a new career. Oh, I can begin a new relationship. Intuitive mind is relationship with the unknown. And since most people are only validated, are only inside of systems that are constantly obsessed with this knowledge mind, they're just missing the door every single day. They're missing the moment every single day. Part of what's hard too is that one moment in intuitive mind does not get you the golden trophy that everyone's going to love you for. It takes years. It takes years in that unknown space before you really find anything that's even of value to other people most of the time. There's just no way around that. But if you spend time in the intuitive mind regularly, you will feel joy more often than most people. You will be easier to connect with than most people. You will learn things. You will know things that most people don't know, which means you will become more valuable to the people around you. And if you learn to balance those findings and interface them into shapes that the known world already has, that's basically what we call genius. You see something no one else can see, intuitive mind, and then you show it to us, knowledge mind. And when you can bridge those two things, it is genius. It is genius. And so these geniuses, it's not that they had things we don't have. We all have those three minds. It's that they learned how to balance them. They learned how to move directly between them.
Pattern utilization and pattern creation, which
Yes,
is amazing. So I think that you've touched on how people can integrate that and take away from their experiences to then integrate that into kind of like their existing environments. A belief is a poor substitute for an experience. Once you have the experience, it's who you are.
so true.
uh, and so I think that, again, I feel that I imagine that you have now, based off the wellness platform that you've created, how people can integrate that now more meaningfully. Do you want to touch a little bit on that and how people can get more curious about that or find out a little bit more about what you're building and
Sure.
what you've built?
Yeah, I mean, I know I went on a kind of a deep explanation there of that last question. So to just summarize an answer to it, be weird more,
Yeah.
honestly, like just try the thing that you don't normally do. If you eat with your right hand, usually eat with your left. If you've never tried eating a meal with your hands in the last 10, 15, 20 years, try it. Wash your hands, invite a bunch of friends over, and then all eat with your hands just to see what it feels like. Try feeding each other. Try walking backwards downstairs. Just that alone will spike the level of joy that you'll have in your body, I promise, because you don't know how to walk downstairs backwards. So you do it very carefully because you know the stakes are potentially high. You hold onto that handrail way harder than you normally do, and you walk backwards slowly and you feel your body. You feel it. So it is as simple as you just exit slightly to the left. The knowledge mind will almost always be there, dominant, thinking all the stuff that it is on a regular basis when you can just be a little bit weird. And in early stages, it doesn't have to be like, here's a new symphony I made, everybody. That's like super late stages. Like super early stages is like, we always go to, you know, John's Tacos. Like, let's try Ethiopian food tonight, let's drive the extra hour to find the one Ethiopian restaurant. There's little things like that that on a consistent basis give your brain more access to that part. And one of the beautiful things about the brain is that it's plastic. So the more that you use a certain piece, it becomes stronger and stronger and stronger. And it's why access to intuitive mind has just atrophied for most people. It's just shrunk to almost become inaccessible. And then you get the idea, the belief, I'm just not a creative person. Bullshit. Watch your dreams. Watch your dreams and then tell me you're not a creative person. There was a horse, and then it turned into a cat, and then my aunt was there, and then I was playing baseball. You're fucking creative. Like all of us are insanely creative. It's just that, we kind of forgot how to be that like in normal life. So all that to say, there's two things that have kind of come up from all this research over the last 20 years. There's kind of three. The first was a photography technique that I developed that drew out authentic expression from people. That's where a lot of this stuff was initially learned. I developed that technique about 17 years ago. It became viral through that community. It gave me enough money to spend these last 17 years basically deeply studying and researching this from an anthropology point of view. From all of that, there was a meditation practice called Kindrêd that was built. And Kindrêd is a communal practice that recreates the healthy circumstance of tribal units, that teaches you how to regulate the emotions of another person and thereby regulate your own. And deep enough into the practice, you learn how to do that cool trick that I said before, where you can talk to God and you feel better after that. I don't usually talk about it in those particular terms, but there's very clear neurological places that you can end up reaching where you don't need other people to regulate you any longer because you have basically reached a multiplicity of self. And whether you want to call that by another name, that's semantics to me in a certain way. It's very, very clear that humans have the capacity to reach a place where they can self-regulate. It's not the first step. It's quite deep into the journey. And many people who appear to have it because it's good for their brand or something like that don't feel like they have it to my body when I talk to them. So be careful again of that beautiful thing that you said, the difference between the belief and the experience. But all that to say, Kindrêd is the meditation that I developed. Many ways to talk about it, but a simple way is it helps you practice reaching intuitive mind in the safest, most efficient way that I've ever found. So it is kind of a collection of practices that help you reach intuitive mind with other people and then become validated for that. And validation has a really bad rap. Um, it's quite unfortunate. It's only bad if validation is being given for things that aren't healthy for you. If validation is being given for things that are healthy for you, validation is amazing. It's actually a really important part of the process. You and I are validating each other right now because you'll say something brilliant and I will respond to that and I'll be like, oh, yes, that's
And vice versa.
validation and vice versa. And as we do that, both of our bodies are sending the signal to each other. You're important. You matter. You and I are tribe. Safe. And from safe, access to higher brain function, access to intuitive mind. So Kindred does that in the simplest, most efficient, most practical, fun way that I have ever found. That's what it is. That's what it's designed for. The disclaimer on that is it's a little weird. It's definitely a little countercultural because you're specifically doing things that you don't normally do. I was so obsessed with Kindred when it kind of coalesced about 5 years ago that I was like, literally all of the world needs to be doing this every single day. And I became obsessed with how do I get this to happen? And I kept running in to the pressures and forces of the world and realized only people who are a little braver will really be ready for Kindred at this particular time. Only people who have hurt enough will really be ready for something like Kindred at this particular time. So if you fall into that category where you have hurt enough, where you are a little bit braver, where you are in explorative space, I would definitely recommending checking out one of the retreats that we do somewhere around the world. I used to do about 15 a year. Um, I'm doing maybe one more this year because I'm moving on to the next thing that I'm about to tell you about. But there's about 200 teachers in the world that have trained in it. They are all giving retreats all around the world. It's spreading in a really beautiful way. And it's just good. It's simple. It's fun. I love Kindred. So that's basically Kindred. Uh, what kind of sparked from that is what I'm working on right now. My main project is called Superfeel, and we are building a social space that is built for human connection and built to help you access intuitive mind and built to help you be validated for it. So it actually is Kindred also, but in a much more accessible form because it looks like TikTok, but it looks like a TikTok that helps you connect with your friends much more easier. So rather being obsessed with the voice of another, you can still benefit from those voices, but there's much more emphasis in the design placed on your own voice and daring to risk your voice and daring to share your voice in a much, smaller tribal unit where it goes by gradient and you get validated for that. So I could talk for another hour, about exactly how all that is achieved, but the short version is we are in beta for that. If a person's interested in being on the beta testing, they can go to superfeel.com and sign up for the beta right now. And we're going into live release probably in about a month. So we have it's so funny because all of this has come full circle. My core realization from these last 20 years is humans are a response to their environment. And I became interested in social space because I realized social is the largest environment that's ever existed. And it is not built to draw the best out of us. It's it's built in a certain way to do the opposite. It's built us to turn us into these scared creatures because it's way easier to sell to a scared creature than it is to someone who's safe and in their power and understands the butterflies and the wind are beautiful. Harder to sell to that person than to someone who's looking at the one who has all the coconuts. And the message of ads is almost always the same. You're not important, but you could be if you had this, so that's basically where all of this has come. I'm so excited about what we're building. I never would have seen myself in social, especially, really in tech of any kind, but turns out deeply studying human experience and what actually helps humans grow is a really important thing to merge with technology. And that's what we're doing.
Absolutely, bro. It's so important for it to come together, and it's a big part of our next evolution. I'm excited to continue to learn, and I have some ideas, but we'll get into that later. Last thing I wanted to share with you or ask you actually before you go is if you had 3 days left to live. Actually, first thing is so superfeel.com if they want to sign up, learn, realize where can people find you if they want to connect with you, get to know more about you specifically. Where's the best platform right now?
Well, yeah, if you're interested in the Kindred meditation, that's feelkindred.com, not
Okay.
think kindred, feel kindred, feelkindred.com. And second one is if you're interested in Superfeel, which is being a part of this new social space we're building, which is amazing. That's on superfeel.com. Um, I won't be saying this for very much longer, but for right now, I will say you can still find me and what I'm doing on Instagram. So Instagram, Jesh Rocks is my name. You just find me there. But to be honest, I'm not on there that much anymore. I will just be using the following I've developed there as soon as this launches to herd them all into a far superior one that is literally built not only to help them grow. This is a little wild to say, but it's true. So I'm just going to drop this. We have a clear path to universal basic income in maybe 10 to 15 years. The first practical way to get there that I've ever heard of in my life, and not by charity, but by creating mechanisms that allow you to basically make a living by learning. I'm so thrilled for that. I'm close to expressing it. I'm freaking out because it's the dream of my life for perhaps many lifetimes. We're within striking distance of it. And it is thrilling to me to believe that in perhaps as little as 10 years from now, many people on the planet could fuck this corporate shenanigan thing that's happening where we all leave feeling like the life just got sucked out of us. And instead, you wake up in the morning and you are helped, you are directed, you are guided towards learning what most inspires you and what most gets you excited. You are helped to connect with others in the world who are working on similar things. To have all of that be supported and automated and made simple, the barriers removed. Oh, it's stunning, and that's literally what we're working on.
So exciting, bro. I'm so excited. Pumped. I'm super pumped. And if you had 3 days left to live, what would you be doing? Or what would you do?
It's funny because there is one very specific thing that I would do, but I can't say it because it's a part of the stealth of what we're building right now. But I will tell you in the conversation after this, off of the record, and people will know what it is in about a year. So
Nice.
all I'll say is that it's beautiful and it blows my mind that it's even possible. And it has to do with what we're building with Superfeel.
Nice. Well, I'm excited. Big love to you, brother. Thank you so much for coming on the show. You're a blessing. I thank you for your time and energy. And don't go anywhere.
Thank you, brother.